The air on Vera 7 was dry and dusty. A world at the edge of human expansion, it was the kind of place where people came to escape, to hide, or to make their last stand. A colony where everything was cheap except time. Time ran slowly here, and for most that meant one thing: survival. Alara Drake stood at the spaceport, a worn suitcase in hand, looking around with cautious eyes. She had come to this god-forsaken place as a mail-order bride, promised a life of comfort and security. The offer had seemed perfect at first: a rich rancher on a distant planet, a place far away from her past life, her mistakes, and her debts. All she had to do was show up and play the part of a perfect wife. Simple. But as the dusty wind swept through the platform, Alara's heart sank. There was no sign of her husband-to-be. The spaceport was mostly empty, with a few travelers coming and going, their footsteps echoing in the open hall. A few workers moved about, stacking cargo and prepping ships for departure. The planet felt as empty as it looked. She checked her watch. The man she had agreed to marry was late. But she was patient. She'd waited for much worse. Then, a sound caught her attention. The distant hum of a hovercar engine grew louder, and her gaze shot to the entrance of the station. A small speeder appeared, kicking up a cloud of dust. The vehicle came to a halt with a squeal of brakes, and a man in dark clothes stepped out. He was tall, his frame broad and strong, though it was clear from his stagger that he was badly injured. His clothes were torn, stained with dirt and blood, and he leaned heavily against the vehicle as he tried to steady himself. "Excuse me," Alara called out, rushing toward him. She could see that something wasn't right. The man's face was pale, and his eyes, though sharp, were filled with pain. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a faded holocard, his hands trembling as he handed it to her. Alara took the card and glanced down at it. Her heart skipped a beat. The name on the card read Lennox West, the same name as the rancher she was supposed to marry. But something was wrong. This wasn't the man she had been told about. The man she had expected to meet was older, stronger, with a confident air about him. This man looked as though he was on the brink of death. "Lennox?" she asked carefully. His lips twisted into a weak smile. "Yeah, that's me," he rasped. "I guess you're my bride." Before Alara could respond, Lennox crumpled to the ground, collapsing in a heap at her feet. Her heart raced as she knelt beside him, trying to steady his breathing. His wounds were deep. There were cuts across his arms, a gash on his side, and bruises on his face. He was losing blood fast. "Hold on," she said, more to herself than to him. "I'll get you help." She looked around, but the spaceport was empty now, and there was no sign of anyone willing to assist. It seemed that no one cared about the dying man in front of her. She bit her lip, weighing her options. There was no one else. The only person who could save Lennox now was herself. She had to act quickly. With a sigh, Alara gritted her teeth and took charge. She carefully helped Lennox into a nearby hover car, throwing his arm over her shoulder as she dragged him into the passenger seat. She knew this was a risk. No one would stop her, but no one would help her either. She was alone in this. Where are we going?" Lennox whispered as she started the engine. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "To your ranch," Alara replied, glancing at the coordinates on his holocard. "It's the only place I can get you the help you need." Lennox didn't respond. His eyes fluttered closed, and Alara could hear the rasping sound of his breathing. She pressed the accelerator harder, pushing the vehicle across the barren landscape. The ranch wasn't far, but the journey felt endless. The planet's dry, cracked terrain stretched out for miles, with no signs of life except the occasional cluster of faded trees or the rusted remains of forgotten ships. Alara focused on the road ahead, trying to ignore the gnawing worry that Lennox might not make it. "Hang in there," she whispered, glancing at him again. "I'm not losing you." His response was a faint, painful chuckle. "You don't have to save me. I'm not worth it." "Don't talk like that," Alara snapped, shaking her head. "You're going to make it. I'll get you to your ranch, and then we'll figure this out. Just stay with me." Lennox managed a small, tired smile. "A lot of people have tried to take me down. Maybe I should just let it happen." "Not on my watch," Alara said firmly. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not leaving you to die here." As the sun began to set, casting a blood-red glow over the barren horizon, the ranch finally came into view. It was an enormous compound, high walls, sprawling fields, and a few scattered buildings that looked like they had seen better days. The land around the ranch was vast and untamed, but the structure itself stood tall, a testament to the man who had built it. Ilara pulled up to the main house, parking the hovercar near the entrance. She quickly exited the vehicle, hurriedly pulling Lennox out and carrying him toward the door. He was barely conscious now, but she was determined. When they reached the door, it opened before Ilara could knock. A tall, muscular man with a grim expression stood in the doorway. His eyes widened when he saw Lennox in Ilara's arms, but he didn't question her. "Get him inside, quick," he ordered, stepping aside. Ilara didn't hesitate. She carried Lennox into the house, the large wooden doors creaking as they swung open. The interior was dark but furnished with expensive yet worn decorations. There were signs of wealth but also signs of neglect, perhaps a side effect of the man's decline. She laid Lennox down on a large bed in the master bedroom, and the man from the doorway quickly set to work. "I'll get the medical supplies," he muttered. "We'll save him. But you'll need to tell me who you are, and fast." Ilara hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure what to say. The whole situation felt unreal. She was alone, stuck with a man who had clearly been abandoned by everyone around him, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let him die on her watch. "My name is Ilara," she said softly, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "I'm here to help." The man nodded, his face grim. "We'll need all the help we can get." As Ilara worked beside the stranger to save Lennox's life, she realized something. This ranch, this broken man, might just be the key to her future. But she didn't know if that future would be one of redemption, or one of danger. But for now, her only focus was getting Lennox through the night. He had survived worse, she could feel it in her bones. And as long as he had a chance, she would fight for it. The night was far from over. And Ilara knew that this was only the beginning of something much larger than either of them could have imagined. The dim light of the ranch's lanterns flickered as Ilara worked tirelessly at Lennox's bedside. The room was heavy with the smell of antiseptic and the sound of Lennox's labored breathing. She had cleaned his wounds as best as she could, but the man's injuries were severe. She had seen death before in her life, but never in such close proximity. The way his pulse faltered every time she checked it made her stomach tighten. "Don't you dare die on me," she muttered under her breath. Beside her, the man who had helped her carry Lennox inside, a silent figure in the shadows, was arranging medical equipment. He was older, with a rough face and a steady gaze that seemed to cut through the uncertainty of the situation. "My name's Roderick," the man said quietly, his voice low but firm. "I used to work for Lennox. He was once a powerful man, but that was a long time ago." Ilara didn't look up from Lennox. She was focused entirely on keeping him alive. "What happened to him?" Roderick hesitated, glancing at the bed where Lennox lay. "Betrayal. He made enemies, too many. People took everything from him. The ranch, his wealth, even his dignity. He's been running ever since, but there's no escaping it forever. Not when the world wants you dead." Ilara's fingers tightened around the cloth she was using to clean Lennox's wounds. She could sense the gravity of Roderick's words. There was so much more to Lennox's story than she had thought. "You said he was powerful," she said, her voice soft. "How powerful?" Roderick turned, his gaze meeting hers. Lennox West didn't just own land. He controlled vast networks, resources, technology, transport routes. He was a man who had everything and lost it all. Now he's just a shadow of the man he used to be. Ilara's mind raced. She had no idea what she had stepped into. The ranch she had thought would be a place to escape her own past had turned into something far more complicated than she could have imagined. Lennox wasn't just a rancher. He was a fallen titan. As Ilara worked, she couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to him. She had lived a life of survival, always pushing forward no matter the cost. She had escaped a life of pain, but here she was again, stuck, involved in a fight that wasn't her own. But something told her that Lennox's fight was her fight too. She couldn't leave him, not when there was so much more at stake. Hours passed, and slowly, Lennox's breathing became steadier. His pulse, though weak, was no longer faltering. He was still unconscious, but Ilara could see that he was holding on. For now, that was enough. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light through the windows, Ilara stood at the foot of the bed, her hands on her hips, watching over Lennox. Roderick had gone to get some rest, leaving her alone with the man who would change her life forever. It was then that Lennox stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, they were unfocused. Then, as if remembering where he was, his gaze sharpened. "You're still here," he rasped. Alara didn't smile, but there was a hint of relief in her expression. "You're not dead yet either." Lennox chuckled weakly, but it was enough to bring a glimmer of life back to his features. "Guess you're not as bad as I thought." Alara moved closer, checking his vitals one last time. "You're going to need more rest," she said firmly. "But you're alive. That's what matters." Lennox looked at her, his gaze calculating. "You shouldn't have stayed." "It's dangerous here." She didn't flinch. "I don't scare easily." He seemed to study her for a moment, then nodded, though his expression remained grim. "I've got a lot of enemies. You might not want to get involved in this mess." But Alara shook her head. "I don't plan on running. Not this time." Lennox met her gaze, his eyes softening slightly. "You're stubborn. And you're lucky to be alive," she replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. He paused, considering her words. Then with a deep sigh, he closed his eyes again. "You're right. I am lucky. But luck's not going to get me out of this. I need to get my empire back." Alara raised an eyebrow. "Empire? What do you mean?" Lennox's lips curled into a faint smile. "I didn't just own a ranch. I controlled entire sectors of trade, transportation, and more. When they came for me, they didn't just want my land. They wanted everything I had, everything I built. And now they've taken it all. But I'm not done yet. I'll rebuild it. I'll take back what's mine." Ilara's mind raced. She hadn't signed up for an empire. She had signed up for a quiet life, far from the dangers of a past she couldn't escape. But the fire in Lennox's eyes was undeniable. He wasn't just talking about surviving. He was talking about taking back what he had lost. And for the first time, Alara wondered if she might want to be a part of that. "Why me?" she asked, her voice low. "Why did you let me help you?" Lennox looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and caution. "Because for all my mistakes, I know one thing: I can't do it alone. And something about you makes me think you've got the fire to help me." Alara didn't know what to say. She had never been someone to trust easily, never someone to rely on others. But there was something about Lennox's strength, despite everything he had lost, that called to her. She paused, then spoke, her voice steady. "If we're going to do this, you need to know something. I'm not here for your empire. I'm not here to fight your battles. I'm here because I made a promise to keep you alive." Lennox's expression softened. "Fair enough. But I'm going to need all the help I can get if I'm going to take back what's mine." Alara nodded. "Then let's get started." Over the next few days, as Lennox recovered, Alara learned more about the man he had once been, and the empire he had lost. Lennox wasn't just a rancher. He had been a leader, a man who had once controlled resources that spanned across planets. His downfall had been swift, and his enemies were many. But as his strength returned, so did his resolve. Together, Alara and Lennox began to plan. The ranch wasn't just a hideout. It was a hub for everything he needed to rebuild his network. They would start small, quietly, but soon they would gather allies and resources. But Lennox knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't just rebuild his empire. This time he would build it better, stronger, and he would never make the same mistakes again. And as Alara stood beside him, watching the sunrise from the ranch's balcony, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. It wasn't a perfect future, but it was a future that was theirs to shape. Together. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice calm yet filled with determination. Lennox smiled, a spark of ambition in his eyes. "We start by taking back what's ours." And with that, they began the first steps toward building something new, something powerful.